All right. Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to another episode of More Content Talk. That's the only show that cuts through the glam, the glitz, and all the bullshit to bring you the truthiest news that we can find. So, I have some good news for once, and it's almost it's almost surreal because I'm so used to bad news these days. I'm so used to hearing, I don't know, that some Republican has decided to throw babies off a cliff or something like that, and that's their new policy. It's something ridiculous. Yeah, I guess not the white babies, but when you're starving people to death, you're essentially killing them. And I think that that's something that people are eventually going to have to reckon with. And I think that some people did last night because they decided to vote um, the conservatives widely out of office. I don't think conservatives won one election last night. They performed terribly. I knew they would. I wasn't necessarily shouting it from the rooftops because, I've done that for certain things in the past and it didn't work out. But I was right this time. I think that when you make a decision, a conscious decision, to tell people during the holidays that not only are you going to not work to extend government funding, but you're going to go out of your way to cut funds that have specifically been earmarked to feed people in times of government shutdowns, which is what Trump did. And he said, you know what, I'm not going to give that to them either. Let them starve. I don't think you understand how historic this is. This is worse than anything Reagan ever did. Way worse. There were, of course, like cuts to social welfare programs under Reagan, but they were never during the holidays. They were never during the time of giving. The whole reason that this country was founded was largely on a Christian mission, right? The Puritans. I'm not talking about the founders. The founders were not necessarily religious. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the old days of the early colonies, but long before guys like Jefferson come into play and stuff like that, who were obviously not Christians. But John Winthrop came here and founded the Puritan colony, and it was a Christian experiment, and it was based on giving and being good to other people. And regardless of what you may have heard about the Puritans, and I've read extensively about the Puritans, and there were Puritans who were Christian extremists. Let's not even question that because that would be untrue. And I've talked about the Puritan kind of mania that came from Salem and stuff like that before, so I'm not denying that. Guys like John Winthrop were basically decent people who were interested not necessarily in helping people who weren't white Christians, but at least were interested in helping them. The modern Republican Party is not even interested in doing that anymore. They've essentially bought into Project 2025 to the extent that they've said, you know what? If no one gets along with this, then leave them behind, let them suffer, let them starve, let them die. And so, when people come around and they talk about, well, Jay Jones said he wants to do this and that, what's the difference? What's the difference anymore? What is the difference between saying you want to piss on someone's grave and sending them to their grave? What is the difference? What is the difference between, because people want to talk about Charlie Kirk all the time now. What is the difference between him being murdered in cold blood, which was terrible? I don't condone it. I don't condone political violence. Of course, Republicans are going to tell you, "Oh, everyone on the left condones political violence." Even though political violence doesn't really happen that much on the left, if you actually look at the data. But conservatives don't care about data. They're living in la la land with white Jesus and I don't know, whoever else is their hero, Charlie Kirk and Rush Limbaugh and all these guys. So they don't care. They're just going to call you violent. I don't condone violence. I've never been a violent person. Never committed a crime in my life. And yet I'm earmarked as violent simply because conservatives say so. Amazing. But you know what? It doesn't matter anymore because starving innocent children to death simply because you don't want to shell out a few extra bucks is, in fact, violence. And that's what cutting food stamps is. It's starving children to death. Innocent children who, through no fault of their own, have been born into poverty. Why were they born into poverty? Why? Because the conservatives made abortion illegal. That's why. And if you're going to feed the children and you're going to give them health care and you're going to do all these things, maybe we can have a discussion about that being okay. Maybe we can begin to talk about, well, I mean, we have all these social programs here. Why shouldn't they be born? If you take the social programs out of the equation, now you're just being cruel. It's like when that little baby was born for 2 hours and suffered for 2 hours and then died. They knew that was going to happen. They knew there was no possible chance of that baby surviving. And that's one of the reasons that abortion, of course, was made legal in the United States, is because there are instances where even if you may want the child to survive, they're not going to. Want as you may. And the baby suffered and it died. It lived for 2 hours. Great. But just thinking about that, it really irritates me. And it makes me wonder about the sincerity of conservatives and whether or not they truly do want to make the country better. Because I used to believe sincerely in my heart, when I was younger and into politics, that there was just a misunderstanding that, right, like, well, if we educate these people, then they'll come around to our side. And then there was a time where I was actually a conservative because I saw that, well, I'll just be blunt, I went kind of nuts. And this is another reason I don't really believe that conservatives want to make the country any better. I think that they're heartless because of maybe it's a mental disorder. And it's not necessarily a mental disorder, but I do think that there are some people who are not well on the right, just like there are some people who are not well on the left. These are the people who are engaging in conspiracy theories, and I honestly do think that people who engage in conspiracy theories have a level of mental health trouble. Um, I don't think it necessarily means they have bipolar disorder or anything, or they're psychopaths or anything like that. But there is a level of, when you're talking about, I don't know, chemtrails and all these things, or you see these idiots who are putting up the videos of this is what Seattle looks like, and then it will just be a bunch of crackheads running around. I've been to Seattle. That's not what Seattle looks like. Okay. So, I know that there's a level of mental unwellness there. But then for the people who don't have that level of mental unwellness, for the people who you think maybe I'll be able to engage in a debate with this person and change their mind, because they lack empathy to the extent of, like, it's worse than the Roman emperors and tyrants. The Roman emperors and tyrants at least gave people bread and circuses. They at least said, "Here you go. You can have entertainment and you can have food for free." And this was called kindness. Even Constantine, the great Christian emperor, engaged in this practice and understood that it's a very important practice. And even certain kings and queens of the British Empire understood that you should feed people or you should have orphanages. Queen Victoria, people like this. I believe it was a Russian empress who developed the foster care system, the first orphanage. They had things and social safety nets in places, so that their cruel kind of rulership was tempered by this. And rulership, political rulership, is a balance. It's like a seesaw. You know, you have to maintain a balance. The modern conservatives do not want to maintain that balance. They're online right now because women resoundingly voted Democrat in the election yesterday. They are online right now talking about repealing the 19th Amendment. And they're serious. I really want you to stop buying into the notion that this is just a fringe thing. All right? No. The right is the far right now. Everything that the far right thinks, the right will do because they know that that's what they need to keep winning. because that is what is making them winning, is engaging with these far right conspiracy theories. Guys like RFK Jr., he's in the government. He's a conspiracy theorist. Nothing he says is true. He lied through his teeth and said he had data, hard data, that proved that Tylenol caused autism, and then came out a few days later and said, "Oh, no, I don't. I don't have that data." He's a liar. He's in the government. Steve Bannon is another one who's a big conspiracy theorist, and he's not necessarily in the government, and I think that's mostly for optics, but he has huge sway over Donald Trump, and he tells him what to do. He's Donald Trump is Steve Bannon's bitch, okay? And Laura Loomer is another one. Laura Loomer is crazy. You think Marjorie Taylor Greene is bad? Marjorie Taylor Greene, at least, I think, can like read the room, right? She's still crazy too, but she at least like is saying now, like, hey guys, like this is getting a little out of hand. Like even I'm like, whoa, like, and when I'm like, whoa, that means we need to calm down. Laura Loomer, she's worse. She's talking about things that you can't even fathom. I mean, you can't even imagine the things that she's saying. Go online sometime and look at the things that she says. It's baffling. But this is a woman who holds huge sway over Donald Trump. She was one of the ones that was out there calling Mandani, who's a guy that, I mean, by all measures, like, is just some normal guy. Like, like, yeah, he comes from a wealthy background. Maybe he's a bit of a nepo baby, sure. But most politicians are. And that's the other thing, right? The hypocrisy. Oh, it's a nepo baby. Who is Lindsey Graham? Who is Donald Trump? Who is Marco Rubio? These are all fucking nepo babies. Everyone in the fucking government, except for what, like AOC and, like a few other people, are nepo babies. Of course. You need tremendous wealth to run a political campaign, folks. You can't get into office the vast majority of the time unless you have that wealth. And this is something that is widely accepted in America. But now, because it's a left-leaning person, we have to call them a nepo baby. What about Donald Trump? He grew up with a silver spoon shoved up his ass. He's a nepo baby. But we don't talk about that though, right? That's how insincere the right is. And like I said, the lack of empathy on the right, that's the reason that they lost so big. They want to cut your Social Security. They want to cut your Medicare. They want to cut a woman's right to vote. They want to make abortion illegal in the whole country, not just in red states, the whole country. They want to cut your food stamps if you have those, or if perhaps you might need access to them someday. Those will be gone. They will eventually probably get around to cutting unemployment too, because that's always been something that they've wanted to do. What will you do to eat when you lose your job? And don't think in terms of if, think in terms of when, because I'm telling you right now, I was in a place where I thought I would never lose my job, and I did. And it was through no fault of my own. You don't have to do anything bad to lose your job. There can come a point where the boss simply doesn't need you anymore. You fulfilled your service at that company. My father-in-law, you know, decent guy, white guy. Uh-oh. It happens to white people too. He worked. He was very prosperous and successful for years, decades, at the same company. And then one day, we called him in. He was at work. Said, "Hey, thank you for everything you've done, but that's it. We don't need you anymore." Sent him home. Came home that day. Said, got laid off. He sent out all kinds of resumes to different companies that were similar to the, I believe it was engineering or something, some tech oriented thing that he had been doing for years. And this was his career. His whole life had been dedicated to this career. He worked in this career his whole life. He had all kinds of experience, all the experience in the world. You know where he works now? Safeway, a grocery store. Because he couldn't get a job in that field anymore. Because they said, no, sorry, we don't, we have other people coming in and we're more interested in those people now. That will be you someday because you're not allowed to get retirement in this country anymore. Yeah, if you're working like a union job or maybe like certain government jobs where there are unions, but even these government jobs that everyone said was so safe. How many people did Elon Musk and a company lay off? Are you starting to understand where all of this is going? And then they're bringing in things like AI, and the Republicans are investing very heavily in that too, because then they won't have to pay you at all, right? And this is why too they want to get rid of these social safety nets, is because once they don't need you to work anymore, they will not care if you live or die. The only reason they care if you're alive right now is so you can come to work. That's literally the only thing that is making the wealthy give a single solitary fuck about you. And once that's gone, if they figure out a way to do it, thankfully, I don't think it's coming around the corner like a lot of people do because, well, Republicans are very stupid. The people doing AI software are very stupid and they don't understand how to train these things properly. But one thing I will say is that it probably will come eventually, and then you'll really be fucked and you won't have any social safety nets. This is the dumbest time to cut things like food stamps and social security and all these things. When people can't even find work, but you want to cut this and you want to cut that. And so people said they started to catch on. They say, you know what, let's get these guys out of office. No matter who, it doesn't matter if it's a democratic socialist or, a moderate or whatever. Just get these crazy Republicans out of office. And kudos to them. Kudos to them for finally realizing that they needed to do that instead of continuing to play this game of like, oh, well, maybe the Republicans will be nice to us this time. They're never going to be nice to you. They hate you. All right. They hate you. They hate that they have to feed you. They hate that you're alive. This whole thing of increasing the birth rate is nuts because, as I've clearly pointed out, they don't give a shit about you once you're alive. Then it's time to go work. And you say, like, well, I'm disabled. I can't work. Well, what do you want me to do about it? It's impossible to get disability. I've tried so many times to get disability, and I have epilepsy, and I can't. You just have to work. This could be you. This could be you sitting here one day doing a podcast to try to make a little bit extra change so you can feed your kid. Someone online said, you know what, you're far closer to being in poverty than you are to being a billionaire. And boy, is that right. You think you're going to be Elon Musk someday? You really think that? I feel sorry for you if you think that. All right, everyone. I hope you have a phenomenal day, evening, afternoon, fiesta, siesta, downtime, chill time, lunchtime, party time. And remember, when life gets you down, you can always laugh at something else. And also, you can go to my website at greatpretendershub.com and you can book me to come and perform for you, host your event. I do stand up comedy, I do murder mysteries, all kinds of things like that. Whatever you like, I can do. I can come and, perform for you. And that would be really fun to do. Also, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. That helps me out. Visit my Patreon if you'd like to make a donation. And last but not least, follow me on Acast and all those good places so that I continue to get my numbers up there and, maybe make a little something extra of myself while I have my time here, help my family out. All right, everyone. Take care. I wish you the best and keep voting those conservatives out of office. All right. Good job. Keep it up.